Hello and welcome to our group project presentation on urban sprawl in the Greater Toronto Area by Emily Green, Emily Warren, and Rachel Bishop. Our agenda is as follows. First, there will be a statement of the problem. Then we will provide some background information on what urban sprawl is. We will list some of the impacts. We will list some of the stakeholders, provide two different case studies, and provide our recommendations and a conclusion. So what is the problem? Urban sprawl is a common issue in most major cities across Canada. Urban sprawl is the rapid and unsustainable expansion of low-density development in suburban outskirts of cities. When well planned and under control, this type of development is acceptable, but in the GTA, sprawling is happening at an unsustainable rate, which poses challenges for the future.
This not only impacts available agricultural land, but affects the permeability of the land and worsens flood risks. On top of simply modifying land in an environmentally detrimental way, the sprawl of suburban residential areas increases car dependency because necessities like grocery stores, schools, or employment remain located in urban cores, far from where an increasing majority of the population lives. In these suburbs, there is insufficient infrastructure to accommodate the needs of the current and future population.
On the other side of the coin, there still exists a desperate need for safe, affordable housing in many cities, and development is not occurring at a fast enough rate to provide housing for a rapidly expanding population. This is what makes a wicked problem.
How do we define urban sprawl? Urban sprawl can be characterized by low-density residential areas that have a reliance on personal vehicles and generally are not diverse in their land uses. Earlier, we explained that urban sprawl may result from the need to accommodate population growth, but this is not always the only reason. It can also occur from poor planning strategies and laws that do not focus on sustainable growth. It can also be a result from capitalist desires to own attractive properties at cheap prices. What are the consequences that may arise from urban sprawl? One of the most significant consequences of urban sprawl is environmental degradation. This includes wildlife displacement, land development for infrastructure, and channeled streams and waterways. These adverse effects also include waterway pollution from increased runoff from the population, increased flood risks, wildlife cohabitating in dangerous city landscapes, and increased pollution and contamination from ongoing construction. Continuing the list of environmental impacts caused by urban sprawl, suburban neighborhoods consume more energy per capita than city cores, resulting in significantly more pollution than better planned and more dense development areas. Since suburban neighborhoods are typically larger than neighborhoods in city cores, they require more heating and cooling. Car dependency also becomes a significant problem in suburban neighborhoods, since residents are further away from city cores where most of the employment takes place and many necessities are located. Lastly, land alteration cuts back on land that was available for agriculture, forcing agricultural land to be cultivated from natural areas instead. Losing this valuable land means less land with which to grow food for a growing global population.
Looking at other impacts from urban sprawl, one can examine the negative and positive economic effects it has. Employment opportunities are created from urban sprawl, with jobs in the development and construction sectors. However, intergenerational burdens result from urban sprawl as a result of the allocation of tax revenues to newer developments, rather than already existing neighborhoods. As a result of this, these cities raise taxes to compensate for the losses in fund allocations. This creates an unequal distribution of wealth in cities and impacts generations of taxpayers and their ability to grow on their own. Another economic cost of urban sprawl is the increased cost to own personal automobiles, including costs for petrol and maintenance. Even with the implementation of public transit systems, longer commutes result in higher fares for those who are employed in city cores at greater distances from their suburban neighborhoods.
As you can see, this problem is complex and multifaceted. Many stakeholders have a vested interest in different outcomes from urban sprawl planning policies. Such stakeholders include municipal and provincial governments, such as the City of Toronto, and the Province of Ontario. Developers of housing plans, business owners, residents of people living in both city centers and suburban sprawl neighborhoods, and conservation managers, even wildlife who face the threat of encroaching human territory on natural landscapes. Looking now at some case studies, this report, Getting Tough on Urban Sprawl, Solutions to Meet Ontario Climate Change Targets from 2008, analyzes growth that occurred between 2006 and 2008, particularly in the Greater Golden Horseshoe area. One of the key points noted in this case study is that there were many goals set in previous provincial reports. However, there was a lack of information and planning on how to achieve those goals. For example, in Ontario's 2007 report called Go Green Ontario, there were several targets identified in regards to greenhouse gas emission reduction. However, there was no explanation of how to get there or how previous projects will contribute to the reduction of those emissions. Key findings from this report are that there is a lack of integration between the province's climate change objectives and planning policy, urban planning policies and targets, particularly within the Places to Grow plan, are not rigorous enough to combat the extent of urban sprawl and unsustainable development that is already underway. Urban planning policies in Ontario do not require or encourage municipalities to develop sustainable energy plans, targets, or policies. Municipalities and developers lack adequate fiscal incentives or options that make it financially preferable to choose smart growth objectives over sprawl. This case study provides important insight into how planning policy can be improved to reduce the impacts of urban sprawl and build more sustainable cities.
The second case study is the New Urbanism, Hope or Hype for American Communities. New urbanism is an urban planning movement seeking to redefine the nature of the American metropolis by reintroducing traditional notions of neighborhood design and fitting those ideas into a variety of urban and suburban settings.
The new urbanism theory, as described in this report, is based on the idea that suburbs are a recipe for disaster. They cause increased congestion on suburban arterial roads and cause an increase in the dependency on cars and take away open space.
Fulton says that there are two scenarios that a suburb can cause. He describes this as a 2070 problem. If a suburb is 20% built out, it is popular and ideal as there is still plenty of open space, minimal traffic, and has a low density. In comparison, if a suburb is 70% built out, it is overpopulated, the traffic is highly congested, and there is not enough infrastructure and necessities available for the people living there.
This paper critiqued several aspects of the movement and identified shortcomings and areas to consider, such as scale. Can it compete with big box retail that dominates the economy? Can it be applied to a regional scale for a vision of overall growth? What about transportation? Is it capable of relieving traffic congestion and offering adequate alternatives like it claims to? Planning and codes. Can it integrate into local plans and building codes without too much transitional challenge? And can it find success in the marketplace that is so opposed to its ideals?
So obviously we need a solution. Based on our research, here are our recommendations. There needs to be a transition to new urbanism in urban planning and thought and policy. The idea is based on the principle of redesigning communities and neighborhoods to become more walkable. This includes building shopping and amenities in close proximity to housing and accessible public spaces. These spaces are designed for people to walk, bike, and use transit rather than relying on personal vehicles. This creates a more sustainable structure and reduces the carbon footprint of housing and developments. The goals of New Urbanism, as outlined by the Charter of New Urbanism, are as follows. Walkable neighborhoods oriented to the quarter-mile, 5-minute walk, focus on public transit rather than personal vehicle usage, and improve integration of land uses so that the GTA is not comprised of just single-use planning, such as suburbs, but rather integrating necessities within neighborhoods. Following these ideals and principles will be a good guide when making planning decisions regarding the reduction of urban sprawl.
Aside from the idea of new urbanism, some other recommendations we would make are to redefine societal values of growth and expansion. This is a big ask to make, but it is necessary to change the narrative of unsustainable growth on the planet. Instead of measuring growth in GDP, we must measure growth in happiness, well-being, sustainability, or by reduction in carbon footprint. Many municipalities are already declaring states of climate emergencies and transitioning to sustainable development programs, which will be critical to reduce urban sprawl and mitigate the climate crisis.
In conclusion, urban sprawl is occurring at an unsustainable rate in the GTA. With an increase in suburban neighborhoods outside of city cores, there becomes an increased reliance on personal vehicles. Ultimately, the energy required to heat and cool these suburban neighborhoods, along with the increased need for gas to fuel personal vehicles, urban sprawl increases pollution and greenhouse gas emissions.
Land development for urban sprawl results in environmental degradation and ultimately, the expansion of new neighborhoods increase taxes to support their development. A major solution for these issues are designing neighborhoods to become more walkable and to eliminate single-use zoning in sprawling developments.
Thank you for listening to our video presentation. We hope you learned a little bit about urban sprawl in the GTA and its implications on sustainable development.